Since 9/11, U.S. taxpayers have spent $115 billion to help rebuild Afghanistan. And rooting out waste, fraud, and abuse in that spending is John Sopko, the Special Inspector General for Afghanistan Reconstruction. In one probe, he found our military wildly overspent to build an Afghan gas station. But Sopko's aggressive investigations have made a growing list of enemies among those he polices, who are now trying to discredit his work and targeting the Watchdog.
Part of this was to develop a market in Afghanistan for compressed natural gas automobiles.
John Sopko is talking about this $43 million compressed natural gas station in Afghanistan. Impractical and overpriced, he found, by about $42.5 million.
They really didn't do any market survey. They really didn't see if there was enough liquefied natural gas or compressed natural gas.
It's one of the most notorious boondoggles Sopko has uncovered as the Inspector General policing the billions of U.S. tax money spent to rebuild Afghanistan. He's shown here on a recent inspection in Kabul. The gas station, it turns out, was the brainstorm of an arcane federal agency, the Defense Department's Task Force on Business and Stability Operations, or TFBSO. It spent an astounding $800 million American tax dollars over 5 years to kickstart the Afghan economy.
We received more allegations about TFBSO than we have about any other government entity. We heard allegations that they didn't do any due diligence, they wasted the money, and basically the program didn't succeed.
Appointed by President Obama, Sopko, a former mafia prosecutor, is widely considered an effective watchdog of a government culture resistant to oversight, which may be why he's now been targeted by efforts to discredit him and his work. One sign came earlier this year. On the eve of a congressional hearing about the gas station, the Defense Department gave Congress and select reporters entirely new figures on the supposed cost and suggested Sopko's team had it all wrong.
The night before, the Defense Department said, oh, by the way, all that data is wrong, which it may have been, but we got it from them.
At the hearing, the Defense Department's Brian McKeon claimed the true cost of their military-funded gas station was far less than $43 million. As proof, he referred to a new memo supposedly written by military consultant Robert Schraven.
The consulting firm that conducted the assessment has also reviewed its work, and we have seen a copy of their memo to the committee staff indicating the total costs of the station are likely well under $10 million.
And the hearing on government misspending suddenly seemed to put Inspector General Sopko, the IG, in the hot seat.
There are also some questions about the IG.
Senator Tim Kaine challenged Sopko's accounting methods and accused him of waffling on the gas station's price tag.
The fact that the IG is putting out material with two different numbers is something that I definitely want to dig into today and understand.
When you were sitting there and hearing the Defense Department redefining the numbers they had given you and in essence blaming your agency as if it was some dishonest broker, what was going through your mind?
Welcome to Washington. I've seen this before.
Sopko vigorously defended his work.
And I would remind all of the members, our requirement is to report the best number available. We don't make numbers up. In the end, whether it's 43 million or 20 million or 10 million, it's still a lot more than should have been spent in Afghanistan.
So if they're now claiming it's wrong, well, then what's going on with your record keeping?
I watched that hearing, and to me it was remarkable. They made it look like you were the guy that got everything wrong, that you had some axe to grind.
But I felt certain we had the right numbers. We were right. As long as you're right, the truth will come out. And I think a number of members on the committee also realized that this was totally unfair and totally bogus.
Senator Claire McCaskill wasn't buying the military's new memo on the gas station's lower cost.
And the argument that's been put forth in the press that somehow the figures in this are not correct, I mean, frankly, all you did was fan the flames. You know, that somehow it wasn't 43 million when you can't even say where the 30 million went. This is a terrible waste of taxpayer money when we have so many other uses for it.
After the hearing, Sopko continued his investigation of TFBSO, and he remained in the crosshairs. Some in the press advanced the theme that he's overzealous and sloppy. Stories quoted anonymous critics of the federal agencies where he's found waste, fraud, and abuse. This is a Politico article that I know you've seen that talked about you as if you were the guy that made all the mistakes.
Yeah, there was one where they referred to me as the Donald Trump of inspectors general.
Meaning what?
I think back then they thought it was a criticism, but in light of the election, it may not be a criticism.
SOPCO's critics, usually quoted anonymously, appear to come from the ranks of those he's overseeing. One anonymous ex-military official told reporters, SOPCO has turned his office into a cheap media operation that does real damage to due process and U.S. policy. None of the critics we contacted would speak with us for this report. Neil Gordon of the Watchdog Project on Government Oversight says SOPCO is exactly what the public needs.
Certainly SOPCO is fairly aggressive, very outspoken, but we think that aggressiveness is important in Inspector General because they need to safeguard taxpayer money, in this case tens of billions of dollars that have been spent in Afghanistan.
He says if the military is engaged in PR warfare to undermine SOPCO, it's not the first time. In 2014, USA Today obtained inside evidence of an aggressive spin campaign by the military against SOPCO. The plan of action reportedly involved the Pentagon going public to blunt SOPCO's findings before he could release them.
It was likened to a duck hunt where they said that the military will be out in the field bagging its share of ducks while SOPCO was still waking up and putting his boots on.
There are lots of reasons why federal agencies and contractors would be unhappy with SOPCO's work. He exposed $150 million tax dollars spent on luxury villas in Afghanistan to house a handful of workers who could have lived at a military base or the embassy for next to nothing. He uncovered $36 million wasted on a giant U.S. military headquarters in Afghanistan that generals on the ground said they didn't want or need. And he unearthed $600 million spent on a fleet of Afghan airplanes that never flew and were scrapped for pennies on the pound. As SOPCO continued his probe into the overpriced military-funded gas station, he discovered a new surprise. Shraven, the military consultant whose name was on the memo the Defense Department gave Congress, claiming the gas station really didn't cost that much, said he didn't write the memo.
We took a look at it, and we actually talked to the person who allegedly, I say allegedly, wrote the report, and the person denied authoring it. We didn't really find out who did author that report. But, nobody likes an IG who is trying to find out the truth. I would say nobody. There are a lot of people in town who don't like it because a lot of people in town made their careers or made a lot of money on some of these stupid programs.
SOPCO says he now has a host of new questions about TFBSO.
We have now been asked by Senator Grassley and Senator Ayotte and others to do a full-blown audit of the entire $800 million program. And what we are basically finding is the records are horrible. They didn't keep records. And so we're finding waste, fraud, and probably abuse throughout the program.
As for that compressed natural gas station,
no cost-benefit analysis, no sustainability analysis, a program that's dumb on its face. The average person in Afghanistan, their annual income is $690. It costs $800 to convert a car to natural gas. Now, did anybody in the room sit there and say, is there anybody in Afghanistan that can afford this?
Inspectors generals are nonpartisan. I was appointed by President Obama to ferret out fraud, waste, and abuse. And I will continue doing that job under President Trump. The way I view it is, fraud is not Republican or Democrat, it's not red or blue, we're talking about green. I'm here to protect the taxpayers' green, the taxpayers' money, and we'll continue doing that.
It's worth reiterating that we reached out to the Pentagon and multiple SOPCO critics who appear to be linked to military contractors, but they declined to be interviewed for our report. As for the allegedly forged memo the Pentagon presented to Congress, revising the price tag of the Afghan gas station, the Pentagon would only say it stands by the testimony it gave.